for me, Children of Men, it's a realist film, but in what sense? Hegel, in his Aesthetics, says somewhere that a good portrait looks more like the person who is portrayed than the person itself. Like a good portrait is more you than you are yourself. And I think this is what the film does with our reality. The changes that it introduces do not point towards alternate reality. It simply makes reality the more what it already is. It makes us perceive our own reality as an alternate reality. Like we already live in alternate reality in the sense of we didn't do it properly, history took the wrong turn.
Really all utopianism is the impulse to dream your way out of the present. So I'm not against utopianism at all. I think that impulse to dream we need to cherish, we need to develop it. I think we have a very stunted ability to imagine a different world and to work towards it. But I think we do need to identify what it is about a certain ideology, certain models of thought that are dangerous.
It would be interesting to point to some major characteristics of the present day. One of these characteristics is the growing threat coming from individuals. What has happened is an enormous progress of technology, which allows now isolated individuals to have as much power as a whole state. It's called globalization. The second major change, of course, the acceleration of contact between populations.
Una caratteristica fondamentale degli esseri umani che si sono sempre mossi.
One of the primary characteristics of human beings is that they have always moved. They started from a central point, Africa, and then from there migrated everywhere. In the last 30 years, migration has taken on a global dimension and has produced problems. Places of departure have changed considerably, and destinations have changed too. Human mobility is uncontrollable unless you act on the main cause of mobility, especially in our days. I think the main cause is inequality. Inequality of opportunities, not only socioeconomical conditions.
The good scenario is that the countries where the people are coming from, together with the countries where they're going to, get their act together, creating the economic environment so that people don't have to leave if they don't want to. But that scenario has many causes. Not just that they don't get together and do something about it, but that global warming delivers its goods, which is a lot of more water in a lot of parts of poor countries, which means that people will have to leave. And we can call this a kind of environmental migration, environmental-driven migration. Now, mind you, many of these things, the environmental question, the economic question, the civil wars, the privatizing of land, the pushing off of people, those things are happening. They're happening all over the world.
The most fundamental reality at the present time is that the human species has overshot the capacity of the planet to sustain it, both in terms of human numbers and in terms of the impact of these human beings on the planet. This is a very challenging situation, and the first challenge it poses is a really understanding it, of accepting it. Because unless we understand the extent to which we've already damaged the planet, the extent to which climate change is already irreversible, then whatever we do to cope with environmental issues will have no real long-term effect.
I look on the earth as an elderly patient. She is as someone who would be, if she were human, in her 80s. In other words, strong, vigorous for her 80s, but not as young as she once was. She has only, at the most, 1 billion years more to live, whereas she has lived perhaps nearly 4 billion. Because she's quite old, any stress she receives, like it's the same as one of us. I'm at about her age, in my 80s. And if I get influenza, it'll be a lot more serious than it would be if you get it. While our patient, the Earth, has the problem of humans. There are, I'm afraid, too many of them, and they're doing too much damage to the capacity capacity to regulate temperature and composition.
No longer live in a world. World means when you have a meaningful experience of what reality is, which is rooted in your community, in its language, and it is clear that the true most radical impact of global capitalism is that we lack this basic, literally, world view, a meaningful experience of totality. Because of this, today, the main mode of politics is fear. The motive, how you mobilize people, is fear. Political groups today are bands of people who are afraid, who are mobilized by fear. Fear of immigrants, even leftists, fear of too strong state, fear of taxation. This is a definition of infertility, is that when your mobilizing principle is just pleasure and fear. This, again, I think is the very sad indication of where we stand today.
This new contact of populations is, I think, dominated by two major passions. And these two passions come out of a reaction to our inequality. These two big passions are called humiliation and fear. The humiliation is experienced by the powerless toward the more powerful. It encounters, on the other side, fear. And fear is just as powerful a source of violence. In fact, if we think of the major violences of the recent times, they all come out of fear. It is because we were so afraid of what will happen that we accepted torture, and if you are really frightened, you get accustomed to different transgressions of the rules of normal life between human beings.
When people fall in love with what seems to be a perfect theory, a set of rules, and they love those rules more than they love people or places. In fact, they start to see the messy reality of life as interfering with the beauty, the imagined beauty that exists only in their texts, only in the sacred texts, whether they're economic texts or religious texts or some dream of racial purity. I think we need to fear people who love systems more than people, because the flip side of the love is a hatred for anything or anyone that interferes with the realization of that system. And this is the other thing about dangerous utopias, is they can't coexist with other ideas. They need the whole stage.
When people say 1990 was the time of the end of utopias, 1990 fiasco of communist regimes, also of welfare state, symbolized with fall of the Berlin Wall. But the true utopia was the idea at the end of history, now, okay, there may be some dictators here and there, but we have the formula. Global liberal capitalism with democracy.
E anche nel sistema capitalista,
In the capitalistic system, economical inequality is acceptable. It's the engine of production. So, the political organizations and the state have to guarantee this inequality because theoretically, inequality brings richness.
The fact of the corruptions and the abuses of power, that are all legal. Those are our contemporary brutalities. The problem is that so many of these brutalities of global capitalism are not immediately legible. You need to make the connections between that which appears unconnected and to show the extent to which suffering here is a product of what we admire and consider prosperous and desirable there. And so today, too, I think, you see it happening in bits and pieces, that the recognition that this global capitalism needs to be civilized. We need to tame, as the taming of a wild animal, that wild capitalism.
It doesn't have the ability to think rationally, this economic model. It thinks like a drug addict. Where can I get my next fix? It doesn't learn wisely. If we think of any kind of